Good evening, I'm Amirul Aiman, and these are our top stories for tonight. Donald Trump has softened his threat of a strike against Iran as Tehran denies reports of plans to execute protesters by hanging. All that and more coming up on AWANI International. US President Donald Trump has pulled back from threats to strike Iran. Speaking at the White House, Trump said sources inside Iran assured him that killings of protesters have stopped and no executions are planned. He did not, however, rule out any potential US military action in the future.
We've been told that the killing in Iran is stopping, and it's stopped, and it's stopping. And there's no plan for executions or executions. So I've been told that a good authority. We'll find out about it.
Trump had earlier warned that the United States would take very strong action if Iran's authorities went ahead with executing protesters they had detained. Trump had reportedly been strongly lobbied by Middle Eastern leaders not to carry out strikes that could trigger Iranian retaliation against US bases. As tensions rose, the US and the UK moved to reduce personnel at a major military base in the region. Iran is denying reports that it plans to hang protesters amid ongoing anti-government demonstrations as international concern continues to grow. Speaking in a televised interview on Wednesday, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said executions by hanging are not being considered by authorities.
I haven't heard about that, and there is no any hanging.
The US warned Iran it would take very strong action if it executed protesters after reports that 26-year-old Irfan Soltani, arrested during nationwide protests, faced hanging. Iranian authorities said Thursday that Soltani has not been sentenced to death. The country is facing the largest anti-government protests it has seen in years. Human rights groups claim at least 3,400 people have been killed in violent crackdowns. But the full scale remains unclear as Iran enters its 7th day of a nationwide internet blackout. That's the headline for tonight. More news coming up shortly after the break.
Di dalam setiap berita yang dibawa, konteks amat penting. Kami sentiasa membawakan yang tergempar dan terkini. Pastikan Astro AWANI menjadi pilihan anda, tidak kira di mana sahaja anda berada.
Welcome back. Washington remains firm on its plan to seize Greenland, despite talks with the foreign ministers of Denmark and Greenland at the White House. The hour-long meeting between the US, Denmark and Greenland failed to produce a breakthrough. All sides, however, agreed to form a working group to discuss Greenland-related issues in the coming weeks. Danish Foreign Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen described the meeting with US Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Vice President J.D. Vance was frank but constructive. But he said the US push to control Greenland is an unacceptable breach of sovereignty. Rasmussen added there were clear red lines the US could not cross and said the working group would meet soon in an attempt to find common ground. Denmark and Greenland, however, remain open to the possibility of the US expanding its military presence on the island. US President Donald Trump has repeatedly said the US must act on Greenland for national security, warning that rival powers such as Russia or China could move in if Washington does not. France is sending troops to Greenland at Denmark's request, joining Sweden and Norway for joint exercises amid US pressures on the island. In a post on X, French President Emmanuel Macron said the first French troops were en route, with more to follow. Germany, meanwhile, announced it would deploy a reconnaissance team to Greenland to explore possible military contributions in support of Denmark's security. France and Canada have also planned to open consulates in Greenland's capital Nuuk in the coming weeks. While NATO countries regularly send troops to train in allied territories, The timing and symbolism of these moves reflect unprecedented solidarity amid heightened tensions. Denmark, which is responsible for Greenland's defense, warned that any attack on the island would all but end NATO. On Wednesday, it announced an expanded military presence in close cooperation with NATO allies. The United States is moving to suspend immigrant visa processing for citizens from 75 countries as the Trump administration widened its immigration crackdown. The list includes nations where visas were already tightly restricted, like Afghanistan, Iran, Russia, and Somalia, as well as countries where the move comes as a surprise, including Brazil, Egypt, and Thailand.
A State Department cable reviewed by Reuters said U.S. officials are reviewing visa rules to ensure strict screening. It also noted that some nationals from these countries have relied on U.S. welfare or other public benefits after arriving, a key factor in the administration's decision. The suspension, which takes effect January 21st, does not apply to temporary tourist or business visas, which make up the vast majority of visa applications. Demand for those visas is expected to rise in the coming years, with the 2026 World Cup and 2028 Olympics set to be hosted or co-hosted by the U.S. This move builds on earlier immigration and travel restrictions and is part of President Trump's wider push to tighten entry standards for foreigners.
The Trump administration has imposed a 25% tariff on certain high-end AI chips under a new national security order. This includes NVIDIA's H200 processor and AMD's MI325X. Chips brought in to support U.S. technology supply chains, however, will be exempt.
The White House says the U.S. currently makes only about 10% of the chips it needs, calling the reliance on foreign suppliers a significant economic and national security risk. The tariffs are linked to an agreement by Trump allowing NVIDIA to sell its advanced H200 AI processors to China. This week, Washington said required chips destined for China will be routed through the U.S. for testing by an independent third-party lab rather than being shipped directly from Taiwan, where they are manufactured. Once the chips enter the U.S., they become subject to the 25% tariff. NVIDIA designs the chips but relies on Taiwan semiconductor manufacturing to produce them, including the H200 model. Shares in NVIDIA, AMD and Qualcomm edged slightly lower in after-hours trading following the announcement.
U.S. President Donald Trump has decided for now not to impose tariffs on rare earths, lithium and other critical minerals. Instead, he's ordering his administration to work with international trading partners to secure supplies.
The move delays tariffs that could have disrupted the U.S. economy, while the Supreme Court weighs the legality of Trump's broader tariff program. Trump directed Trade Representative Jameson Greer and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick to negotiate import arrangements that won't threaten national security. He also called for price floors, a measure Western miners have long sought. If negotiations fail, Trump said he could consider minimum import prices or other unspecified measures.
Colombian President Gustavo Petro will meet U.S. President Donald Trump on February 3rd amid rising tensions over Washington's actions in Latin America. Petro says the talks in Washington will focus on bilateral relations and the U.S. regional security campaign.
Washington and Bogota have worked closely on security for decades, but relations have grown strained since Trump began his second term. Petro, a leftist former guerrilla who leaves office this year, has been one of Trump's most vocal critics, particularly over U.S. migration policy and deportations. Tensions escalated after Trump accused Petro of links to drug trafficking, and the U.S. imposed sanctions on him and family members. The upcoming visit follows months of sharp rhetoric, including U.S. threats of military action in Colombia after the capture of Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro by American forces.
U.S. President Donald Trump's recent aggressive moves from Venezuela to threats against Iran and Greenland have stirred global unease. Critics say it signals the beginning of America's waning influence and could push countries to band together as uncertainty grows over Washington's brazen moves.
I think we are entering a period of global fragmentation. We are certainly entering a period when American hegemony is in relative decline. And I think that Donald Trump, by the way, is a manifestation. It's the extinction burst of American hegemony, of the unipolar moment.
Federation warns that as American power becomes more unpredictable, nations in the global south may start cooperating more closely.
What I think is more likely to start happening is that countries around the world will start banding together in order to protect themselves against the United States and against the West and whatever other outside actors there are. The world, the members of the global South, will start looking for alternatives to Western-dominated organizations, both economically and from the point of view of security. I think that if the United States continues to be so unpredictable and aggressive, that the global South, at least, will start coming together.
Malaysia will continue to block the AI chatbot Grok until platform operator X fully addresses concerns over harmful and explicit content. Speaking at the launch of Centre of Responsible Technology, Communications Minister Datuk Fahmi Fadzil says access will remain suspended until safeguards are proven effective. The move comes after X said it had taken steps to prevent Grok from generating inappropriate images.
Pagi tadi ada berita mengatakan pihak X telah menyahaktifkan beberapa prompt yang membolehkan gambar-gambar yang tidak sesuai dihasilkan oleh AI Grok. Tapi pihak MCMC juga ada memaklumkan bahawa ia tidak menyeluruh. Jadi ada beberapa perkara kami telah minta supaya dipanjangkan kepada pihak X supaya sekiranya mereka berjaya untuk menyahaktifkan dan tidak membolehkan penghasilan bahan-bahan yang dianggap online harm ini ataupun mudarat ya ini, maka kerajaan akan menghentikan sekatan sementara ke atas Grok.
Malaysia imposed a temporary block on Grok on January 11th following repeated misuse of the tool to generate explicit material, including content involving women and children. This came despite prior regulatory warnings issued to X Corp and XAI.
Saya harap perbincangan yang mendalam dapat dilakukan bersama dengan X untuk jamin di masa depan kerjasama yang erat. Ini bukan permintaan Malaysia semata-mata. Dia adalah permintaan Indonesia, banyak negara di Eropah. Jadi bila banyak negara yang menyatakan pendirian yang sama, surely there's something that X needs to look at.
That concludes AWANI International for tonight. Stay with us as we track the strategies and power shifts shaping the new global order. For more updates, visit international.astroawani.com and follow us on social media. I'm Amirul Aiman. Thank you for watching. Good night.